Alexandra Eala replaces Zheng when has to withdraw due to injury, but fans can now look forward to seeing Alex step in.
The Porsche Tennis Grand Prix in Stuttgart announced it in the most straightforward corporate language possible. Alexandra Eala replaces Qinwen Zheng in the main draw. Unfortunately, Qinwen has to withdraw due to injury, but fans can now look forward to seeing Alexandra step in. Professional, polite, procedural. 9 words at the end of that statement. Fans can now look forward to seeing Alexandra step in carried more weight than the organization probably intended when they typed them, because looking forward is precisely what tens of thousands of Filipino fans across 3 continents immediately began doing, and their version of looking forward involves refreshing ticket websites, coordinating travel from across Germany and beyond, and preparing to flood the Porsche Arena the same way they have flooded every other venue Alex Eala has walked into this season. If you have been watching this story build from the beginning and you want to stay inside the community that understood what was happening before the rest of the tennis world caught up, subscribe now. What is unfolding around Alex Eala in Europe right now is not just a tennis story. It is a commercial and cultural earthquake that the WTA was not prepared for, and Stuttgart is the latest city about to find out exactly what happens when an entire nation decides to show up. Let's go through everything that is happening here, because there are layers to this story that go well beyond a routine injury replacement in a tournament draw. Alex earned this Stuttgart opportunity through the WTA's alternate list. There was no wild card involved, no special favor from tournament organizers, no back-channel arrangement. Qinwen Zheng withdrew injured, and the alternates list determined who stepped in. Alex Eala was next in line, and she stepped directly into a WTA 500 field featuring Aryna Sabalenka, Iga Swiatek, Coco Gauff, and Elena Rybakina. 4 of the most decorated players in women's tennis right now, players who have combined for multiple Grand Slam titles and have occupied the top 10 rankings for years, are all in the same draw that a 20-year-old ranked 46th in the world just entered through an injury replacement. That is the context. And the reaction to that context from the Filipino community around the world was immediate, organized, and on a scale that tournament organizers were scrambling to process within hours of the announcement. The institutional tennis world operates on a fairly simple commercial premise that has been more or less reliable for decades. Higher rankings equal higher revenue. A player ranked inside the top 10 draws more fans, sells more tickets, and generates more broadcast interest than a player ranked 46th. When a top 10 player withdraws from a tournament and is replaced by someone ranked significantly lower, the standard expectation is that some fans will be disappointed and ticket demand will soften accordingly. That premise has been proven comprehensively wrong every single time Alex Eala has entered a draw this season, and the data is specific enough now that it cannot be dismissed as coincidence or explained away as the novelty of a new name. Indian Wells was where the pattern first became impossible to ignore. When Alex's matches were scheduled, resale prices for certain sessions exploded past $1,000, not for a Grand Slam final, not for a match between 2 top 5 players, for a rising Filipino player competing in the early rounds of a WTA 1000 event. Fans who were watching the ticket market closely reported seeing baseline listings triple in price within hours of draw confirmations. Those prices were not being driven by tennis rankings or historical results at the tournament. They were being driven by something the WTA's economic models had never properly accounted for: a passionate diaspora community willing to pay whatever it costs to watch one of their own compete on the biggest stages in the sport, regardless of what the seedings say about who the important match is supposed to be. Linz confirmed the pattern weeks later with even more specific data. Reports from the tournament indicated that approximately 90% of tickets for Alex's matches were purchased by Filipino fans. Sessions that would normally see modest midweek attendance at a mid-sized European WTA event became standing room experiences. The atmosphere around her matches was not the polite, attentive crowd that typically fills indoor clay events in Austria. It was the kind of wall of sound, flags everywhere, chanting energy that you normally associate with national team sport events. The Eala army did not just show up to Linz, they took over. Stuttgart now sits on the same trajectory, and the timeline is compressed even further. The announcement of Alex's inclusion came on Monday. The draw was released on Wednesday, showing her first-round opponent. The opening weekend sessions were scheduled for Friday onward. That gives fans roughly 72 hours from announcement to first match to secure access to what the Filipino community has now learned to treat as appointment viewing. If Indian Wells and Linz taught tournament organizers anything about the speed at which the Eala effect reshapes a commercial landscape, 72 hours is more than enough time for it to happen again.
The first-round draw handed Alex a match against Leylah Fernandez, and the layers of meaning attached to that particular matchup go well beyond two players competing for a second-round spot. Both players are left-handed, which creates its own tactical dimension that makes the match genuinely interesting from a pure tennis perspective. But the cultural resonance runs much deeper than lefty versus lefty. Fernandez is of Filipino-Canadian descent, a player who carries Filipino heritage and has spoken about it publicly. She will be walking onto that court, representing a connection to the same community that will be filling the Porsche Arena to support the player on the other side of the net. Philippine sports media had already begun framing the matchup before the first ball was struck as something more than a first-round match. It is a cultural moment that guarantees maximum fan investment from a community that was already going to be there in force, regardless of who Alex was playing. The Porsche Tennis Grand Prix is not a minor stop on the calendar. It has 47 years of history behind it. Past champions include Martina Navratilova, Steffi Graf, and Maria Sharapova. The winner collects prize money exceeding €160,000 and drives away in a Porsche 911. This is one of the premier clay court events in women's tennis before Roland Garros, a tournament that legitimate legends of the sport have won, and a stage that carries genuine prestige. When the tournament's own announcement says fans can look forward to seeing Alexandra step in, they are not just filling space in a press release. They are acknowledging, perhaps more clearly than they realized, that her presence matters to fans in ways that go far beyond her current ranking of 46th. The commercial ecosystem that is built up around Alex Eala in 2026 reflects the same reality. Nike has reported interest in long-term sponsorship deals. BPI and Globe Telecom have doubled down on endorsements. Juice and Milo are leveraging her ambassador status across Southeast Asian markets. The financial picture around a player ranked 46th in the world is behaving as if she is inside the top 10, because commercially speaking, she already is. Brands and sponsors understand that what she generates in terms of attention, engagement, and genuine emotional investment from a massive and geographically distributed fan base is not something you can buy through a ranking or manufacture through marketing. It either exists or it does not. And in Alex Eala's case, it exists on a scale that the sport has rarely seen from a player at her current ranking level. Tennis analyst Steve Flink, who has spent decades covering the women's tour, captured the broader shift in language that applies directly to what is unfolding. His observation, while not made specifically about Stuttgart, describes the phenomenon precisely. Emerging players with deep national support are changing how tournaments measure star power. Credentials no longer tell the whole story. Gate receipts do. The Stuttgart field includes 4 Grand Slam champions and multiple former world number ones. By every traditional measure, Alex should be the least commercially significant player in that draw. But traditional measures have been obsolete since the moment her fans figured out they could turn any tournament into a home crowd, simply by buying enough tickets faster than anyone else. It is worth stepping back to understand how unusual this situation actually is in the context of professional tennis economics. The sport's commercial structure has always been built around the assumption that rankings and titles are the primary drivers of fan interest. Tournaments bid for the right to host top players. Broadcasters pay for rights that are valued based on which ranked players are expected to appear. Sponsors attach their names to events because of which household names will be competing. The entire financial architecture of the WTA as a commercial product rests on the premise that the best players in the world are the ones who generate the most value. Alex Eala is not yet one of the best players in the world by ranking. She is 46th, and she is generating commercial outcomes that are matching or exceeding what players ranked many positions above her are producing. That is not supposed to happen within the existing framework, and the fact that it is happening repeatedly and consistently is forcing everyone inside professional tennis to think differently about what actually drives fan behavior. The loss to Ostapenko in Linz is important context for where Alex arrives in Stuttgart mentally and in terms of form. She had beaten Grauber convincingly in the first round, showing that her clay game was translating well despite limited competitive experience on the surface in 2026. Against Ostapenko in the second round, she led in the second set, held real chances to force a deciding third set, and was not able to close those moments out. The final score of 6-4, 7-5 reflects narrow margins and specific missed opportunities rather than a comprehensive outplaying. It stung, as any loss does, when you can see the moments where the match could have gone differently, but the response was exactly what you would expect from a player who has built the mental resilience Alex has demonstrated throughout her career. No public complaints about the draw or the surface transition. No emotional social media posts about the difficulty of the loss. Within 48 hours, she was on a plane to Stuttgart preparing for a main draw opportunity that most players ranked 46th in the world do not receive.
That forward-looking response is a consistent pattern in how she handles adversity, and it is one of the reasons her fan base has the trust in her that they do. They have watched her save match points down 0-4 in deciding sets. They have watched her walk off the court in Linz to a standing ovation after a loss and respond with gratitude rather than frustration. They have watched her find a Filipino grocery store in Austria and post about it with genuine joy in the middle of a tournament week. Every one of those moments builds a relationship that goes deeper than results, and that depth of relationship is what produces the commercial outcomes that are rewriting the economics of every tournament she enters. Stuttgart leads directly into Madrid, then Rome, then Roland Garros. The European clay swing is the most prestigious stretch of the tennis calendar outside the Grand Slams themselves, and what happens at each stop builds on what came before in terms of ranking points, confidence, and the ongoing story of where Alex Eala's career is heading. A deep run in Stuttgart would be significant for her ranking and would send a clear message about her clay court credentials going into the bigger events that follow. But even beyond the results, every tournament she plays in Europe this spring is another data point in the pattern that tournament directors from Madrid to Paris are already watching closely. The French Open draw is roughly 6 weeks away. Roland Garros is the most important clay court tournament in the world, the event where clay court legacies are made and where the combination of physical and mental demands on the surface are at their most extreme. If the Eala effect continues to build through Stuttgart and Madrid, the commercial implications for Roland Garros extend well beyond ticket sales into broadcast rights negotiations, sponsor activation priorities, and how the tournament approaches scheduling decisions for players outside the top 30. The WTA has been trying to crack the Asian market beyond China and Japan for years, investing resources and strategic attention into building audiences in a region where tennis has historically been secondary to other sports. Alex Eala is doing more to advance that goal with every match she plays than any institutional program the tour has created, and she is doing it without billion-dollar academy systems or government backing. She is doing it with talent, grit, and a diaspora community that has decided collectively to make every European clay court feel like Filipino soil. Tournament directors who have already experienced the Eala effect know what is coming. Indian Wells watched resale prices hit $1,000 for early round sessions. Linz watched 90% of match tickets go to Filipino fans. Stuttgart is about to find out what happens when a community that has been building momentum all season arrives at one of the most prestigious venues on the calendar with the full force of everything they have been carrying since January. The Porsche Arena seats over 4,500 people. Stuttgart has one of the largest Filipino communities in Germany. The math, as multiple observers have pointed out, is not complicated. What makes all of this remarkable when you step back and look at the full picture is that none of it required a title, a Grand Slam run, or a top 20 ranking to produce. Alex Eala is 20 years old and ranked 46th in the world. She has not yet won a WTA title. She has not yet reached a Grand Slam final. By the traditional measures that the sport uses to identify its commercial stars, she should be well below the level of player that generates the kind of economic disruption her presence is producing. The fact that she is producing it anyway is the story. not as a curiosity or a temporary phenomenon tied to novelty, but as a documented, repeatable, accelerating pattern that has now shown up at multiple tournaments across different countries in different surfaces. Indian Wells, Miami, Linz, and now Stuttgart. Each event adds another chapter to the evidence that something genuinely new is happening in women's tennis, and the institution that runs the sport is still working out how to properly account for it. The fans who recognized this early, who were there when she was outside the top 100, who defended her potential in comment sections full of skeptics, who bought the first tickets and traveled to the early tournaments and started the chants that grew into the noise that rattled Ostapenko and Linz, those fans were not simply supporters of a tennis player. They were the early participants in a movement that is now too big and too well documented to be dismissed by anyone paying attention to what is actually happening in professional tennis right now. Stuttgart is the next chapter. The Queen has arrived in Germany. The Porsche Arena is about to become the latest European venue to learn what it means to host a player who travels with an entire nation behind her. And the clay season still has Madrid, Rome, and Roland Garros ahead of it. Will the Eala effect send Stuttgart ticket prices into the same stratosphere they reached at Indian Wells? Or will this be the event where the WTA finally stops trying to fit what is happening into the old framework and admits openly that the commercial rules of women's tennis are being rewritten in real time by a 20-year-old from the Philippines? Drop your prediction in the comments. The answer is coming fast.